Welcome to another Coaching Wisdom Pod. We have Anna Mary Watson with us. She's a performance coach, a coach supervisor coaching outdoor uh, runners, I guess. She's an ultra runner as well, has done a bunch of ultra races, including two 100 miler, which is very impressive. She's also a podcast host. And to sum it up, she's happier or happiest outdoors. Just pretty much my case as well, although I love being in front of a computer. This podcast is brought to you by podper.com if you want to start or scale your podcast. It's also brought to you by this supplement here, Qualia, for the brain by Neurohacker. It's my favorite nootropic to keep me focused and energized throughout my 16-hour entrepreneurial day. Anna, welcome to the bond. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so I am currently based in the southwest of England, though I've had the pleasure of living and working all around the world, whether that has been racing with my ultra running career, or also when I was formerly serving in the British Army. So I'm a former officer, having served for 9 years and 3 operational tours in hot, sandy places.
What's brought you to ultra races? I mean, you need to be built some kind of different way to go through 100 mile and to endure that much pain. What's wrong with you?
Oh, I don't think I've been so directly asked. It is an unusual sport. It's not for everybody. I get that. I mean, I love being outdoors and I love the combination of the movement side of it as well. And for me, there is nothing more than being on a trail in the mountains at night. So you've seen dusk come, and it's that just sense of feeling so insignificant against everything, but also so powerful in that moment, particularly in an event when you've been training towards something like and just really feeling in tune. And it's a lot of it is mind over matter. So for me, it is a lot about escapism. It is a way, it is getting away from life. It's being on the trails. I just think it's a really great way to travel and see the world. And the community around the ultra running world as well is something really special.
I agree with all of this. What about the pain part? Do you love pain?
There's definitely a point where it hurts, I won't lie, and a good old trail sob, and a bit of a release. And it's where you can really, it's like that sweet spot of actually how far can you actually push yourself? At what point do you break? And I think that comes into fruition around a DNF. Unless you've experienced a DNF, do you actually know how far you can actually go? Or actually, are you playing safe? So it's this real kind of dance in the moment. And I don't know, there's a pain pleasure threshold, where it's a bit of a same side of the same coin. And a lot of it is type 2 fun afterwards. And it's amazing how the pain then does recede and you don't remember it in quite the intensity that it was in the moment.
So tell me about your DNF. To me, a DNF is like really when your body cannot push you forward and or you broke something. Then there's people like David Goggins that I guess go through these things, but there's always like long-term damage. So not sure if it's super smart to push your body to new limits because that means you might skip some other races in the future and might postpone your ultra running career. So tell us about that DNF of yours and how did you exactly knew that you reached that did not finish limit?
Mm. So yeah, did not finish. It's an interesting one. Um, and just circling back before I go there, it's ultra racing at a professional level is not inherently that good for you. Like from a health perspective, it's not really great. And when you look at the longevity of the careers of some ultra runners, how long is it? And I, knew for myself when I was racing at the top of my career pre-COVID, actually what were my iron levels? What were my what was my immune system like? What was my hormones like? And they're taking a battering. Like racing, going through the night, running for 100 miles, it takes a battering your body. And having finished a couple of 100 milers, I knew what state I was in afterwards. Like when you give it your all, you are done. So when I was in Reunion Island for an event called Diagonale de Faux, the Fools Crossing, which is a huge, it's one of the classic old ultra events in the French calendar, particularly. And it is particularly tough because you're not allowed to use poles, which again in ultra running is a huge, huge help, up to 20% off the legs. The temperatures go from basically freezing to 35 degrees. So you're having to physically deal with that alongside the running. So within this event, it's also very remote. You go into this massive, big old volcano that, you know, once you get in, the only way of getting out is either you get out or a helicopter gets you out. And mentally, my run into that event had not been ideal either. And all of this then accumulates. And I got to 126 kilometers and I was done. I knew that to continue would take me, even though it was only another 40 kilometers, the terrain is so brutal through the jungle, it was probably going to take me another 10 hours. And at that point, I was done. And, you know, looking back now, do I regret it 5 years later? Well, I'm going back in October to finish. And I've got a very different race plan going in now. And it is ultra running is mind over matter.
Wow. Tell us about that new plan of yours, and also like the mental part of getting a DNF. Like, did you like quickly surpass it, and do you go into that race with a chip on your shoulder?
So a DNF, it depends how you hold it. And for me, I held it a lot at an identity level. So it wasn't just that I had failed at the event. For me, I took it for a time to mean that I was a failure, which is really damaging. And actually coming through that and working with my coach, then how to rebound in 2020. And we had a lot of, you know, mental, emotional support during that. 2020, I then set out, had a really successful race in February, and then clearly the rest of the world knows that COVID hit, which just wreaked havoc across the world. You know, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a business person, you know, families torn apart, everything. So that then took another adjustment to that. And now I'm going to this race, you know, I'm 5 years older. I'm now 45. And the difference between racing at 40 and 45, as much as I would love to say it has no difference, I definitely feel that my body, particularly having battered it through my 20s in the military, through operational tools, military training, and then competing at a high level, I'm aware that my body responds differently. And I need to adjust my training. I can't take quite as high training loads. I focus a lot more on strength. So it's kind of making those tweaks. So ultimately, when I went and stood on the start line in October 2019, I was standing there as an elite sponsored athlete. I am no longer an elite sponsored athlete. I am myself. So in a way, that pressure's taken off me. So I can go and have my own game and take it. It's almost the performance. I'm there still going there to perform, but actually I'm going there to perform and I don't feel the external pressure. This is for me. I'm doing this race for me. And yes, I will start slow and I will be the tortoise, which has always been my mantra, which I've not always stuck at. And particularly in Reunion Island, you could be forgiven for thinking that actually instead of a 100-mile race, it's a 10K race when you see people set off along the seafront. It's mental, the way that people take off and the pace that they're going. So I'll be playing my own game and I will have a picnic along the way because food, nutrition is so important. If I need to stop and maybe have a 20-minute cat nap, I will do that. And that's something that I wouldn't have considered before. I will also take a battery pack to ensure that my phone is fully charged so I can listen to music, again, which I would not have done. And I'll probably take some photographs along the way, again, which I would not have done. So there's some tangible changes to actually how can I get through this event, which actually it can be quite a lonely experience as a female and as a Brit. It's a very French race and the female percentage of ultra runners on the start line is shockingly low. And it's something that I really am a huge advocate for. How can we get more women on the trails, and how can we get more females going long as well?
Any cat nap tips for us? How do you get to sleep when your biochemistry is a total mess?
It's more a pause, feet up, 20 minutes, and then go. Though I have had one event which I did, which was 145k, so not quite as long, but nearly 100 miles. And I surprised myself at actually how I was able to cat nap, because normally I struggle to sleep during the day. Like siestas is not something that I do. And I often trace this back to my military training. I'm trained to be alert. So it's more that pausing. And some people have, like, literally they will have a 10-minute trail by the side of the trail, they'll set an alarm on their phone and they'll just sit for 10 minutes. And yes, whether then they use caffeine to get going again, there's different ways of playing that.
Right, because yeah, me personally, I think I'd wake up with a headache if I get sleep, which is pretty impossible, just like you said. I think it's the mental aspect of it, right? It's like the reward that's coming to the brain. Hey, that nap is coming, yay. What are other mindset tools that you have going on for you? For example, today, well, I have a couple when I'm running for sure. Like I try to fall into that meditative state and not think about anything, which is a good tip generally if you're a meditator. Today, it was like smelling what's in the air, smelling. We often don't use our smell when we're running and identifying stuff. And sometimes it can bring out positive memories. Any mindset tools when you're running to stay in the positive?
Mm. Well, for me, it is very much about being in the moment. And that's, partly I love to go to different countries, is partly to move through the landscape. So I am present, I'm in the moment. And when I'm running, there's a lot to think about, whether it's, you're on a technical trail, you want to be concentrating on the trail, or else you're going to go splat. And these trails are literally, you're in the jungle, there's tree roots, there's massive steps. You need to be concentrating. And that in itself does use a lot of energy. So then you want to be eating. So for mindset, for me, like, I love food. Like, eating is something that I really enjoy. So the constant food. And then also, okay, well, how far have I gone? What is my pace? How far is it to the next checkpoint? How far is it to the next, I don't know, ascent, descent? How far is it to the finish? What is my ascent rate going uphill? And what is my heart rate? How do I feel? So there's lots of check-in points that I'm kind of mentally keeping myself alert to. I'm not daydreaming. As soon as you daydream, then actually you lose focus, you lose concentration. And that's when you can fall into yourself, or actually you're just off your game. So it's very much you're in that race moment. I mentioned earlier that I might take my phone with me and listen to music. I don't normally ever listen to music. So this would be a treat. And it's not that I'd be listening to music the entire time. It would be like there might be a song every hour or every 2 hours or something, just to give me that little boost. And I do find sometimes, when it really gets tough, the counting game, which is really quite boring, 1 to 20 and repeat, 1 to 20 and repeat, 1 to 20. Beyond 20, I lose count. But being in that moment, and actually every step is a step closer to the finish line. And believe me, the finish line and the support I've had from people to get me to the event, and in a way sending out connection to them from the trails and thinking about them and everything that I've done to get to that moment. And then also, yes, there is a bit of time travel to the finish. Like, what am I going to do on the finish line? What have I got waiting in the drop bag for me to eat? Some food theme going on. And then what am I going to do the following day? And for me, this event, unfortunately, I need to fly via Mauritius. And I've booked myself, 4 days in Mauritius after the event to relax with a nice little beach hut. So that is a hook, because yes, it's gonna get dark. There'll be hallucinations. It's a tough race.
Yeah, hallucinations can be fun sometimes, like a free ayahuasca trip. But I haven't gone through those yet, though, because like I said, biggest distance I did is the 80K. I just signed up for a 100K in Vallarta, which we'll talk about a bit later today. But got a bunch of questions for you. Your tips are interesting. The 1 to 20, I think I've tried it, and I think my brain would go crazy doing that. And the finish line thing, usually I don't think about the finish line because it's more torture than it is fun for me. And that just how to that's just to say how like all our brains are different, I guess, and we should have like a different mindset tools. I have a couple that I want your feedback on. Um, so on the cell phone, like David Goggins, for sure, like a compilation of Goggins and other ultra runners, like Whitney, I forgot her name, but she's like you probably know her. She does like 200 milers, 300 milers. She's crazy. So have these people on your phone while you race. I think it's a huge motivator. I love the tip of like thinking of your close ones. And I have one related to that, which is to have all the people you love record messages and download them on your phone and listen to these messages while you're like climbing this tough hill. I think that can be a great motivator. And the last one is yeah, like actually that one is a bit interesting. I will write up like a handwritten message, and I think I'll check like one every 1 or 2 miles, like positive message or stuff that I want to work on myself this year, aspirational stuff like I'm gonna be a dad soon or something like that. Something that I can look at in the race and that can really inspire me. What do you? Oh, and one last one which can lead to our next conversation, which is sort of contrarian, but I'm going to run this 100K with an ex-business partner of mine. He's a great guy, one of my best friends. Do you think that can be good or bad? And what do you think about the other tips that I gave?
Oh, oh. I start with the one, the 100K that you're doing with your business partner. And, it depends. Like, what do you want out of the race? The fact that you're going and have collectively bought in to do it together, then that's how you have that race strategy and how that then unfolds. But ultimately, you're going to that experience together and you'll be enduring that, looking after each other, supporting each other. You'll both have highs and lows. And the fact that you've bought into that beforehand and you've come to that agreement, go for it, have fun. And it's not for everybody. For some, it's about very much time alone as an individual, pushing yourself. And it comes back to this idea of, performance of an individual and performance of a pair or a team. How do you relate to that? Yeah, I've done some adventure races in a pair. I've done some adventure races in a triad, and yeah, it can get a little bit spicy when people are getting tired, and how you manage that because it's a different dynamic. You're not going out like a solo beast, so it's about having those kind of conversations and open communication in preparation of it beforehand. But yeah, have fun, like go for it. Um, and I think with the tips to kind of keep yourself going, it's like it's what works for you. I sometimes have messages written on my hand. I know that I've often raced and I've had people turn up at different checkpoints or just see them along the side of the route. And that's just been such a big boost. I've done some multi-day experiences where people can write to you and you get letters. And like receiving those letters is such a really motivator, and then I've carried them with me. I mean, I'll admit when I race, I'm normally like utterly rigorous as to how much I carry. So for me to carry a few extra grams of paper, it definitely means that it's important to me. I'm only small, and any bit of weight from my kind of what I'm carrying to my body ratio, it really, really makes a difference. But it's we're all different, and it's very much kind of testing different ideas out. And I get it, the 1 to 20 is not that inspirational, and that's when I'm in like a super dark place and just so tired that anything else is like too much. Even sometimes like getting your phone out and having a look at something, that's like too much effort because all you're doing is in that like tunnel vision, one step at a time.
Right. And should we set up some rules like, if I'm not following the rhythm, let's say that we agree to a 9-10 minute per mile rhythm or something like that, which is pretty decent. If I'm not following that, I'm not running, if I'm not keeping with the pace, then yeah, he has the permission to go, because the logic is exactly this. I do want to do expedition races, and this is sort of training for it. An expedition race
Mm.
is sort of way up there. It's like 7 days. And yet I want to train for that. So what do you think about this?
I mean, the pace thing during ultra running is it's an interesting one. It's like keeping to the pace and how feasible that is depending on terrain, depending on the climate, and really having that appreciation for feel as well. And I have a pace that I know that if it's flat terrain, I'm carrying a certain amount of weight. I know what pace I can maintain. So that's like my default. Clearly, jiggy ascent terrain becomes a bit more technical, things change. But I'd very much recommend, getting out there on the terrain together. If you can get out and do a bit of a route recce, I also find that from a mental perspective really, really helpful. For me, like knowing the route helps. Though for others, it's the novelty, and actually they love the unknown, and that's what gives them the boost. So again, we're all different.
Right. A couple of more questions. Do you have like 5 more minutes?
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Okay. Temperature management. Reunion gets really hot, really cold. Vallarta race. I mean, it's nothing like Reunion, because I've studied the Reunion race, Grand Raid, and just crazy. But Vallarta it gets pretty hot, right? 88% humidity. So any tips on temperature management, specifically heat and UV protection? I'm buying like this hoodie to protect me from the sun. So any on terrain tips for that?
I mean, humidity, I have to admit, is something that I've never been a fan of. I've raced in the desert a few times, but the humidity is something else that just absolutely, for me, I find it absolutely wipes me out. I've always been a big fan of cool wings, which a lot of cyclists and triathletes use, and then you can pour water over yourself, and that helps with that. And a lot of it does come down to hydration, and that's not just hydration during the race; it's hydration before the race, during the race, and after the race as well. And whether you can do something like get your sweat tested, so that you know what is your salt rate, what is the volume of water. So the more you can dive into the science behind that and train with it can be really, really helpful. Um, and sometimes just during the day when it is super humid and super hot, there's an element of expectation on how fast you can actually go, because it does have an impact. And actually, there's been races where in the heat of the sun and in the afternoon, my pace is slowed dramatically. And it is what it is. When it starts to cool, it picks back up again. So I think there's that element of expecting that. That would be my top three.
In food, how do you make sure to not have your guts turn upside down, which is generally
Mm.
the greatest problem in ultra running?
Yeah, yeah. So I am a fan of eating more real food. My stomach does not cope with gels or sugar basically being chucked at it for, I mean, what you're talking 24, 30, 35, 40 hours in some cases. So, and again, it depends, where you're racing, how you have access to food, um, how hot it is the food going to spoil? So there's a number of different factors. But for me, if I can eat real food, I will. And do the longer races, if I can have like a cheese and pickle sandwich or an avocado or some fruit or some nuts. I regularly train in France, and believe me, I will factor a boulangerie trip in to get a quiche and an almond croissant along the way. Um, and that's what I've trained with, and that's what I'm used to. And I talk with a lot of friends who do this sport as well, and whether they stop and have some chips along the way or a bit of cold pizza. Um, that's I'm just a true advocate of real food, and I mean you can end up going down so many rabbit holes around how many carbs that you need to be getting in, and it can end up you can spend an absolute fortune on nutrition. And I'm a bit like, give me a bag of nuts, give me a bag of dates, it'll be fine.
There you go. Last question here. The caffeine intake, what's your take on it? Because the 100K I'm about to sign up to, pretty sure I'll do like 18 or 20 hours. I'm not like a super fast run. And my priority is always like getting there, right? It's not like finishing on the great time yet because I'm not like sponsored or racing for time and just racing for the DN medal. And I think I'm gonna do 18 to 20, which means that at some point we're gonna hit many downs. We're probably gonna bunk. So what's your take on caffeine? Should I follow my normal caffeine intake that I take on a daily basis, the same times? When should I inject big dose?
I mean, it comes down to very much, how does your metabolic system process coffee? And I don't know. And it comes down to having an awareness of what is your response to caffeine. For me, I've had various bloods done over the years and genetic testing, and I've been on this full performance journey. So I'm very sensitive to caffeine. So I don't have caffeine in my normal day. I will drink rooibos and I will drink decaf. But believe me, on race day, I will drink coffee and I will drink tea, and it will likely have some sugar in it, which again I would not normally do. But that would not be until it's dark, it's nighttime, it's that witching hour, and I'll use it as a bit of a boost.
Right. Well, Anna, thank you so much. We mostly talk about like your running career, not the coaching side. Let's probably do around too soon, but dropped a lot of useful knowledge, or at least for my upcoming race. Thanks for that. Where can people find out more about you?
Yes, so I've got my website, rfmcoaching.com. So that's Reach for More Coaching, RFM Coaching. And I'm on Instagram as well at RFM Coaching. And that's it. I've not entered the world of TikTok or anything else yet.